All right, so let's turn to the presentation today. And you met the team, you've met all the important folks that you'll be in contact with, and of course, the most important folks on the call today is our nonprofit partners. So thank you all for coming again. Looking at our online link, as you know, the announcement went out on August 13th for the request for proposals. And if we go to the link there, I'm just going to go to it on my screen here. Okay, so you see where the announcement for the proposals is there, stating the application due date for Friday, September 24th, also the availability of funds. Okay, so you can go to that website and get all the materials there, as well as the plans and policies that we'd like you to weave in and speak to in your proposals. Okay, so if you click here under the application guidelines and the scoring criteria, all of your information will be there. We'll get to that in just a minute. Okay, so here's our timeline. The proposals were, the RFP was released on August 13th. The pre-proposal conference is today, and September 24th at 4 p.m. the proposals are due. We'll be scoring primarily in the month of October, if needed, November, and then awards will be announced on December 16th. We'll have a post-award kickoff meeting sometime in the month of January, where we talk about timelines and underwriting criteria. We'll go into more depth at that meeting. We will speak to it a little bit today, but at that meeting, you'll really understand the specifics of your award, what's expected, and also be able to ask us any questions of any foreseeable issues that may arise. So we have about 2.5 million available. This may be a little more if we do have some additional program income fallout. So we've just stated it as approximately, but right now we're right around the 2.5 million mark, a little over $1 million in CDBG and 1.48 million in home, which is inclusive of the 321 designated for CHOTOs. And we have that set aside designated for CHOTOs every year. So today we're going to talk about the application guidelines, the instructions, the evaluation criteria, and then our additional rehab standards and our closing instructions and monitoring. And then Beverly's going to briefly talk about the underwriting requirements and the documents that are needed for that. So again, the application is due at 4 p.m. on September 24th. All the materials must be included in that application package. And if you have any questions ahead of time, you can shoot me or Malia an email. It's best to email me. That's the best way to get a hold of me before you call me. And then Malia, you can call or email if you have any questions about application materials or not able to access or what have you. And I'm going to go over how the applications will be submitted, which is submitting a PDF version of your entire application. There will be a share filed link. So when you are ready to submit, shoot me an email and then I will give you a link to submit your application package to. Okay. Leslie, you had a question?
Well, I think you answered it last year when we were doing the uploading. I was trying to upload separate files, but I think I remember having to do just one large PDF the whole thing. I remember having a little bit difficulty having either the PDF was too large or something.
Yes, I vaguely remember that issue, and I want to say I think I had 2 submissions from you guys. I think I had one that was different files, and then one that was one whole file. So I think we eventually worked through it in the share file. It's supposed to be able to take large files, which is why we have it going that way, as opposed to just kind of sending it to an inbox. So we should be okay, but obviously if you have any issues, just let me know, because I'll literally be sitting, I'm sure Malia we'll all be kind of sitting at our computers, making sure that they come in okay, to give you guys credit.
Thank you.
Any questions about the application submission? So we're still asking for the original copy with signature to be mailed or delivered. And when we say delivered, there is a gray box in front of the HCD building that it sits, like if you're facing the building, it sits to the right of the building, and you can drop your original copy in there, or you can mail it to us, because we will get the mail. Just make sure you allot for enough time for us to get that in time for the deadline. Everything has to be in on the deadline, even if you're doing the primarily electronic copy. So we just need the original signature. We need that wet signature on one of those documents to certify that it was a original signature. If you're doing paper copies, you can do all 5 hard copies, and of course one with the signature, hand deliver it in the gray drop box, or you can mail it to us. But again, a lot for enough time. It does have to, and it is going to be stamped when it comes in, but just make sure you're super safe in that time to make sure it gets to our desk, you know, in time for your deadline. So you can choose how you want to submit. Chris.
I have a puppy.
Oh, is that so?
She just came in the house to say hello to me.
Oh, okay.
Sorry
There you
about
go. No, it's fine. Okay, any questions on that? So the eligible projects this year, it's acquisition and rehabilitation for scattered site rental, condo, townhouse, single family, or multifamily rental projects, 30 units or less. Okay. Our preference is for vacant properties, but if your property is occupied, we ask that you reach out to Carol ahead of time. What we've noticed this year is sometimes there is challenges getting a hold of previous tenants or a tenant that is moving out. And so, or there may be some time needed to get the story straight in terms of how that tenant is moving. I see folks nodding their heads. So it's better if we kind of get a heads up of what's happening in that situation. And if you want to reach out to Carol, her information is going to be on the slides. So just shoot her an email and say, hey, this is the situation going on. The preference, obviously, though, is vacant properties. The minimum project requirements, we're asking you to align your project with the housing blueprint, con plan, and the community-wide housing strategic plan. And we're going to go to each of those documents after this slide. The housing blueprint and the consolidated plan, they're actually worked into the scoring criteria. And then the community-wide strategic plan and the other documents, the One Fairfax plan, as well as the proposed county strategic plan. We would like for you to read those documents in prep for this application and work in the language as well as the objectives that are covered in those plans. And the goal here is so that you understand the larger picture of what we're trying to achieve as DHCD with the work of our partners, our nonprofit partners. And so the hope is that you look at these plans and you digest these plans, you understand, you know, the hard work that has gone into these plans. And some of you have been very involved in putting together contributing to these plans. So it's important that you read these plans over before you submit. In your proposal, we're looking for you to address your specific housing objectives, looking at the funding guidelines, the eligible projects that we went over, making sure that your project is eligible. Also, if the home maximum per unit subsidy limits, because a significant portion of this funding is home, looking at the subsidy limits per unit, we will go over that when we go through the application. The rent limitations, the income limitations, and looking at the CHODO checklist if you are a current CHODO. And remember, we do the CHODO application per project. So we'll be recertifying you as a CHODO as a part of your project. So if you want to be eligible for that subset, that 329 subset of funds, basically, so you'd be eligible for the whole pot. But if you're not a CHODO, you would not be eligible for the 329 subset. If you are a CHODO, you'd be eligible for the entire pot. If that makes sense. Okay, so we certify per project on the application. So you'd be submitting your CHODO application as well as your project application. And then the rehabilitation standards. If you plan on doing any rehab, and Jenny's going to go over this, if you plan on doing any rehab, even if it's small rehab, it's just important to understand what the current guidelines are there. Okay, so let's go through some of the plans here. So the consolidated plan, the link is provided in your slides. And we're going to go to the consolidated plan just so you know where it is and what it looks like. A lot of this can be found through our website. I'm going to have to stop sharing and share each one, okay? Unless there's a nifty way to do it. Okay, so here's our consolidated plan. And if you look at the top, can you guys see that? Let me see if I can move this. If you look at the top where you can find it there on the fairfaxcounty.gov website, housing data comp plan. Okay. And here you'll find the 1 year and also the 5-year consolidated plan, and our new 5-year consolidated plan, the 22 through 26. Okay. Okay, and the next one is the community-wide housing strategic plan. Taking a minute. Okay, here. And looking at phase 1 and phase 2 of the plan. So there's 2 phases, and you can go into each phase by clicking here. Any questions about those 2 plans? Okay, we have the proposed county-wide strategic plan and the housing and neighborhood livability. So this is the county-wide plan. And this link goes directly to the neighborhood and livability section. Okay. Neighborhood livability. And up here, the address, strategic plan, housing, neighborhood livability. It talks about the sections, and if you scroll down, you have the introduction here, the challenge questions for neighborhood and livability, basically were questions and the indicators and the metrics here, how we're going to measure success in those areas. And I think it's really important here to read through the strategies as well as the strategies in the community-wide housing strategic plan, because a lot of them were coalesced with this was, worked in conjunction with that plan, the thought that went into the community-wide plan as well as the county-wide plan. A lot of C's there. Any questions about those two? Okay. And then, of course, the One Fairfax equity policy. This is of extreme importance. Obviously the work that you do, equity is a paramount consideration. We'd also like you to speak to that in your proposals and align it with, our equity policy as well, the one Fairfax equity policy. Can you guys see that? Oh, that's the strategic plan. Hold on. We're going to go back to that one because I think it took us to the strategic plan. So we're going to go to the Chairman's Task Force on Equity and Opportunity Recommendations. And this is a helpful document for you to read if you want to look for more language in terms of alignment. Okay. Okay. I'm going to change that link in your PowerPoint to make sure it goes directly to the One Fairfax equity policy, and we'll circle back to that just in the sake of time. Okay, so the evaluation criteria. We have the demonstration of need, that's 0 to 20 points, the project preparation and innovation, 0 to 25 points, management, capacity, and real estate experience, 0 to 25 points. And then project leveraging and financing is 0 to 30 points, and that equals 100. So we're going to go to the actual proposal now. So first, I'm going to show you the application guidelines, and then we'll go to the scoring criteria. So here's the guideline document. It gives you the link to all of the plans that we spoke about. And of course, our supervisor's goal, it mentions the 5,000 new units of affordable housing by 2034. It outlays the acquisition and rehabilitation, scattered site rental, and the multifamily projects. Also, too, the additional points will be given to these special needs categories. Again, our deadline, September 24th. And the 2 ways to submit. So all the application guidelines are there. The funds available. And again, the mention of CHODO, being certified as a CHODO to utilize the entire pot. This is of note. So we're looking for projects that, there is additional points given to projects that can be completed by April 22nd. And at the outset, June 30th, 2022, because obviously that's going into the new fiscal year. So April 22nd, you have additional points and can be occupied 6 months within the grant award. So June 30th is a little bit farther out. And although your project will be eligible, you'll get additional points if it can be completed by April. Statutorily, we have 24 months to use the funds. But our goal is to complete these projects as soon as we possibly can. And again, for all projects, if you're looking, look at our current strategic plan, our current 1-year action plan, and our current housing blueprint. And again, you have links there to all of that information. Projects can be located in the Fairfax County, and also we have urban county cooperation agreements with the town of Clifton, Vienna, Herndon, City of Fairfax, and Falls Church. So essentially, projects can be located in any of those jurisdictions as well. Okay, and the rest I'll leave to you guys to read. I think we just need to look at the eligible cost quickly. Acquisition costs, labor, materials, site improvements, energy efficiency improvements. These are the costs that are eligible under CDBG. And then these are the costs that are eligible under home. As you can see, CDBG has a broader scope. Whereas home is mainly for the actual structural unit itself. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay, we'll discuss the loan terms in just a bit, but I just wanted to give you guys an overview of the application guidelines. On our appendices, we go a little bit over the housing blueprint. Again, go to the links. I encourage you just to peruse those documents. And then we have additional policies here that are worth you looking over, you know, if you think that your project's going to be affected by them. But here are the subsidy limits they did not change since last year. So they remain in effect, the ones from June 2020. So these are the subsidy limits for home. And then here are the CDBG and home rent and income limits. Are there any questions about the rent limitations? The maximum rent you can charge? Okay, good. And then here are the income limits. And again, if you're applying as a CHOTO, you want to complete this checklist, which includes all your legal documentation, talks about your capacity, your structure. Okay. And Jenny, I'll have you come back to the rehabilitation standards, but we'll come back to this document. We'll just get through some of the scoring criteria. Any questions on that?
I have a question. Is there any kind of financial match that the organization has to bring in other than what might be above the subsidy limits to make it work? Is there any actual official requirement of a match?
There is, when we go through a project preparation.
So you'll get to that.
I'm going to get to that, right, in terms of what the match that we're looking for. And really it's about the points that you can score based on your match, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So number one is demonstration of need, and this is possible of up to 20 points in this section. And again, we're looking for, you know, alignment. So you're gonna, I mean, again, the folks on the SAC, you know, they, it's kind of like a fresh set of eyes in terms of, you know, your proposal. So it's gonna be, they're gonna be looking for you know, the alignment with the other policies, also you demonstrating your need, why your project is important, why it's vital to our community. You know exactly why it's vital. The folks reading it want to hear from you why it's vital and why it's important. Why is this a need in our community? So if you clearly describe your target population, your household AMI, and also to, if there's specific groups, if you're hitting all of these groups, you can score a point in all of them. So if you're hitting some of them, you'll score points in some of them. And also proximity, where your project is proximity to public transportation, active retail, recreation. Is it accessible to other amenities for your tenants? And then finally, supportive services and case management. Have you allotted for that? If there is a need in your population that you're serving, have you allotted for that? So you get some additional points there too. Any questions on criteria number 1, demonstration of need? I don't see any hands up. Okay. Okay, criteria number 2, project preparation. So the knowledge of your targeted area, so where you're acquiring or developing, what do you know about that area? And there's a worksheet in which you describe, and you put attachments to where you describe where you're acquiring, and you know where you're developing and why you're developing there. Your project completion timeline. This is where we spoke about the 6-month completion, and this is at each SAC member's discretion. You know, can award you points, higher points, and it's their discretion how many higher points if projects are projected to be completed in April versus June. So they have a 0 to 10 range there. And if you have a site identified and a contract is signed for that, then you'll score higher in that area. And under project innovation and collaboration, we're really looking at your ideas and your capabilities of producing green housing, efficient housing. So, and also too, how you organize your housing, if you have technology in-house that you're utilizing, you know, even if it's something not mentioned here, speak to how you're managing those units. How this project will be managed. And also to, if there's any green or energy efficiency, you want to make sure you mention that in the proposal as well. Okay. Okay, so management capacity in real estate. This is about your organization. So we're looking here to talk about the experience that you have as an organization, developing, acquiring, rehabbing real estate. I believe in the proposal we asked for how many units you own and how many units you manage, because we know they can be 2 different things. The staff experience with working in this type of work, and you know, if there is also staff experience with ongoing compliance, because that's a huge piece of this. Is we are married, quote, for 30 years. So the ongoing compliance is huge, and it's something that it requires a lot of work on your part, especially when we come out for our compliance visits that happen at 1 to 3 years. And that's all of your units, because each unit is considered a separate unit, unless you have a multifamily or they were purchased all on the same date as one project. So each of your scattered site are considered a separate unit. So they're up for on-site monitoring, and Jenny will go into that 1 to 3 years, and depending upon the risk level. And then, of course, our annual desk audits that we know you guys absolutely love. All right. So, so the compliance capacity, again, we're speaking to that. That's huge for us as our staff that understands the drill with that. So you want to speak to that in your proposal. Also, if you have previous projects with DHCD or CCFP, you want to speak to that as well, and the success of those projects. Again, the SAC is not necessarily going to know your history with us and with CCFP and the work that you've done in the county. So it's always good to speak to that. And I'm sure all of you guys have standard language you can throw in there. Okay, so Chris, this speaks to your question on capacity for project financing and leveraging. So looking at the fiscal condition of your organization, the stability of the organization to carry out the project. And this is where we ask for this is a distinction. We'll look for a general performance of your properties in this proposal in underwriting, what's going on currently with your properties. But if you are awarded and then the underwriting process happens, then we'll ask for how the new project specifically will fold into your existing portfolio. So that's the difference between what's asked at procurement versus what's asked at underwriting. The underwriting is more specific to the project that we're closing at that time. Project costs and financing and your operating and budget plans, showing a positive cash flow. Of course, right now we know we're forecasting. You may not have the tenants identified. You may not have all the particulars of that unit, but we know that we're going on forecasted numbers. And again, that's the difference between the procurement and underwriting, is that you'll be submitting more solid numbers at underwriting. And the leveraging here, Chris, to your point, there is the highest points you can score in this area is if you have at least 20% of non-county resources to be used. And again, it's at the discretion of the SAC how many points they will award in that area, each person, you know. And we just ask that our SAC members are consistent in how they score their proposals, consistent with themselves of how they score their proposals. But each SAC member can determine how many more points you will get in that area.
Handy, are resources only financial?
No. You can have non-financial resources.
In kind?
I think we spoke to in kind. That's a good question. I don't think we.
For example, like if you had a builder who would provide a certain amount of labor or something to the project.
Right. Right. I don't think we spoke to in kind in this proposal, but what we probably need to do is make sure that we're very clear on what we mean by by resources, you know. I'm going to open it up to, I think Ryan is still on, Ryan and Laura. And if we want to go ahead and issue an amendment to this to kind of clarify that later on, we can do that as well, just to make sure we're clear. Sound good?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can just hop on
Mhm.
and just say, if you scroll just up a little bit, Cande, to the lead-in intro, it does say
Oh, it does say it. Okay.
resources may include volunteers,
Volunteers.
in-kind
Oh.
contributions, cash donations, goods, supplies, services, donations, grants, and other contracts. So it's just a matter, Celissa and Chris, of quantifying what y'all are talking about in order to score as many points under that leveraging section down below. Does that help, or we can think again and come back with a Q&A?
No, that's very helpful. Would that include case management and support services?
Anything that you think of when you think of total TPE for the acquisition. So when you think of, for all of you guys who have successfully gone through loan underwriting, it's what is in that total project estimate as opposed to the supportive services. So it's more so the capital costs. Although you'll get points for the case management in a different section, just not this particular criteria. You would earn points in your criterion number 1.
The 2, hold on, let me scroll back up.
Demonstration of need.
Yeah,
that last
The 2
category,
points here.
supportive services and case management. And then also possibly, let's see, the overall project description and how innovative or creative you are.
So just to be clear, we're not talking about supportive services in criteria
Section
number
4,
4.
yeah.
Okay.
But you can count, like Chris was asking, the donation of labor materials to do the rehab work.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then Celissa, I know Pathways sometimes has other in-kind contributions too for closing that you bring to the table.
So Laura, this is David on
Oops.
other contributions on the in-kind side. Could we count any discounted pricing from a vendor, counting that discount as value, as an in-kind value? Contribution?
What would be an example, I guess?
Well, let's say a plumber offers to do the work, not at the market rate, but at a discounted rate. And could we count that discounted value as an in-kind contribution?
Typically, and I guess that's beyond just how I normally think of things. Ryan, Sheriff, is that typical, I guess, business practice when you're calculating, for those larger multifamily deals, what David's talking about in terms of like a discount because of a good relationship with a particular contracting service for rehab work?
I haven't seen that specific example in play. Usually it's been, and this has kind of been for multifamily, but when there's a discounted land provided into a deal where you have a very clear way of getting an appraisal valuation for the land, where you know where it is at market, and you can clearly see the discount to that. We can circle back to try to see if in practice there's been ways to apply that to services related to rehab like that. I think it would be a little harder to gauge sort of what the market rates are. But we can potentially circle back on that. I think it would be a little bit difficult, but we're willing to take a look at and see if we think there's a feasible way to do that.
That's helpful. And in particular, I'd like to know if if there's benefit in being able to use closing cost credits towards the 20%.
So Casey, it sounds like we have a Q&A or an addendum question that we can ask about the discounted services and closing cost. Okay, so we'll
Yes.
We'll get together as a team on that. Great questions.
No, thank you. And actually, the closing costs, like getting a seller concession that Salissa's talking about, that does happen quite a lot for us. So
Mhm.
that, yeah, we'd appreciate any clarification on that. That'd be good.
Okay. Okay. I think that covers section 4, unless there's any more questions. Great discussion on section 4. And this, we have an additional guideline here for the projects that are up to 30 units, the multifamily projects, if you are submitting. And the leveraging is slightly different here. The highest points are given on a 4-to-1 leveraging, or 20% of the county resources to be used towards the total project cost. And again, we defined resources up here, but we will get back to you on the in-kind and the closing cost concessions from the seller and contributions from the seller. Okay. So as you read through the application scoring criteria, you have the instructions here on how to submit. Obviously, we talked about that. Your copies and submitted on, the normal format, 8.5 by 11 inch. And then you have your cover sheet. And this goes into the description. When you start on page 8, it goes into the description of what we're looking for in terms of the narrative. So it kind of walks you through everything that you need to hit in your narrative. And then I do want to make a mention on compliance with Section 3 regulations. If they are triggered in your project, to speak to that you are, and it's really more of an awareness, and we want to comply with Section 3 as much as we can. The 504 accessibility standards as well. So if your project is hitting any of those federal criteria, we want you to go ahead and mention that in your proposal. And how you plan to facilitate that. I'm just scrolling down through the application. You guys can read this at your leisure. And then the capacity. So if we keep going down, you have your checklist, and that's to guide you and help you with your submission. And then the top page here, this is the signature page we were talking about. We just need one wet signature submitted. And then your worksheets. Most of you guys have seen this before. Hasn't been any substantive changes here.
I've forgotten, is it a fillable Word document or a fillable PDF?
Right now, we do not have the fillable option available, but you can convert it to the Word and convert it back to the PDF.
Okay.
Any questions?
I think as I saw you scrolling down, there was some mention in terms of project-based vouchers. Will project-based vouchers be available? Can we request them? And if so, what would be the process of us being able to align them with our proposal?
Ryan, I'm going to jump in there unless you have newer information on project-based vouchers. And I think Ryan has popped off, so that's my cue. So I'm trying to see who's in the meeting now. Okay, so right now, my understanding is that Well, Laura, let me give you an opportunity. You may have newer information than I do. My understanding is that there is no project-based vouchers available currently at this time.
Yeah, I apologize. I have not kept up with that since returning from vacation. So you may
Okay.
have just and greatest. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, no, that's okay. What I will do is send our director of that division an email to try just to verify that that is correct. That is the last that I was told, but that doesn't mean it's the most current. So let me check with her and we'll put that in the Q&A. Great questions.
Thank you.
Okay. So any questions about the scoring criteria? I know we spent a healthy amount of time on this. However, it's important, obviously, to score the maximum points that you can score on your proposal. And of course, you guys know we're all available for questions. So we're going to continue through. Let me stop sharing. I think I'm moving too fast for my computer. Give it a second. All right, so the federal requirements, again, if your project is going to be affected by any of these federal regulations, here are your contacts. So Tony Essie is actually the contact for both Davis-Bacon and Section 3. As you guys know, we've had some major shifts because of COVID and people moving around and reorgs and the organization. So Tony is the contact for both Davis-Bacon and Section 3. And then we have a new fair housing contact, Avis Wiley, who just joined that division, who will be the contact for fair housing. And again, I would try email before you call, as many people are working remotely. Okay, so looking at the underwriting requirements, if you are awarded, the final approval and will be issued in December. And so we're looking for a closing once you have submitted your project for underwriting. We're looking at a closing of 45 to 60 days out. Do I have any questions about the closing timeline? And I do want to put a question out to the group in terms of what you guys are seeing in terms of feasible closing timelines. This is, you know, what we need to do our underwriting. Are you guys finding that the timelines are consistent with the 45 days or longer or shorter?
I think we managed to, I think we managed to get everything done in the 45 days as well as your staff, but we've lost units. In the market, and maybe it will change over the coming 12 months, but in the last 8 months or more, people are looking not only for a cash deal and somebody to bid over their asking price, but they're looking to close in 30 days. And there are ones that won't even entertain a proposal from us because we say 45 days.
Okay.
We just have, it's been a miserable 8 to 12 months trying to get contracts.
Would you say that's because of the 45-day stipulation or other factors?
In at least a couple of cases, it's been the 45 days. It's hard
I
for me
see.
to tell because sometimes they don't want to admit that's the issue. And I find it irritating because they can get a contract and then it falls through because of the financing. Whereas if they just went with us to start with, they would have it done in 45 days. But for whatever reason, they think they're going to get, their perfect contract and it's all going to go through in 30 days. And it's just kind of a silly prejudice, but it's there. So I know that we've lost at least, I think I could go back and find at least 2 for sure that we were just flat turned down. I just don't know how many others. They just said, oh, sorry, we're already under contract, and sort of waved us off.
Yeah, I think Leslie said it quite well. I think it's extremely difficult and unrealistic to sometimes think we're going to get the best deals when we're asking the best units in the best locations to wait without guarantees, and when there's so many conditions placed on contracts. And I think the other piece just to keep in mind is the challenge of closing in 40 to 45 to 60 days with the expectation or the prioritization of being able to close by April with those incentives placed on us. So the market has changed. The expectation of a seller is to close in 30 days. And in the Fairfax marketplace, where the competition and the market is very hot right now, it just makes it extremely challenging for many of us nonprofits to be able to go back, even as repeat buyers, to be able to lock in those units. So I think it is something that we would value having greater consideration. And I've advocated for year after year to be able to close within 30 days. I know that Pathways could certainly provide all documentation and at whatever time is being requested to be able to close in 30 days. But there would certainly be benefit potentially in LUC meeting more frequently, or whatever it takes to be able to make that a possibility. So I just continue to advocate and respect the process that it is, but to advocate that we're moving towards a 30-day closure in the future.
It does. It's a good point. It does drive up the cost in some instances because I think the one unit, if we just offer top dollar, sometimes they're willing to go with the longer closing costs because they know that we just offered more than anybody else is going to offer.
And so when you're offering above, and I'm just curious, I don't know if the team has any questions around this, but when you're offering like the top dollar, you say, are you offering the home subsidy or whatever it is allotted for that unit and then plus your own funds?
We came close to that on one. It turned, it's a very long story, and your staff was extremely helpful on the one that I'm thinking of, where it turned out that the owner was lying to us, but those are the kinds of people a lot of times we're trying to buy from. I know that sounds terrible, but
yeah.
But so the staff was great with that one, and that one fell apart. But we were considering using some of our own capital campaign money and things like that to try and we would be over the home limit. We're still not interested in buying over the appraised price. I'm just amazed at what the appraised prices are turning into.
They're coming in low?
No, they, they're $30,000-$40,000 more than what we paid.
Oh, the appraisals are high. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I see what you're saying. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's incredible to me what what they come back at.
You know, the other thing too, Kehinde, I mean, the market is so hot that the sellers can force buyers to waive inspections and appraisals. And that's obviously something we can't do with the CDBG or home money, but that it also puts us at a slight disadvantage, you know, compared to those kind of buyers.
Yeah.
We have a good real estate agent. She really talks up Good Shepherd Housing and how it's a cash deal, and if they can understand that these things are needed and why they're needed, that it, you know, all will work out. And so she understands it very well. Not all the other real estate agents quite get it.
And that's a good point, Leslie. If that is one of the things we'd like to go back to being able to do is to negotiate based on a cash deal, but I don't know if that's something that is if we can make sure that that's okay as we're moving forward. That's a question to be posed, as well as if we can present it as a cash deal to better leverage our opportunity to close.
Well, what are we defining as a cash deal?
We call it a cash deal because
yeah.
they get their full amount of money. We don't have to go to a bank, and so that's why we say we try. Jen explains to the other real estate agent that this is money that's already been allotted to us, that it is there. It's just that we have to go through these 4, 5, 6, 7, however many steps. And once we go through our steps, the financing's already been approved. It is only going through the steps that we have to do. And sometimes the steps take 45 days. But in the end, you don't have to worry about the bank turning us down. So, I mean, I hope what we've been saying is true, but that's how we describe it.
We used to describe it that way, but we were redirected. That's why I was asking for clarification, because it helps tremendously if we can go back to marketing in that way, because you're absolutely right. It makes all the difference in the world in being able to negotiate that. But we had to kind of back off of that at one point. But our realtor had done that before. But the clarity is just in terms of the communication. If we can have clear communication on our capacity to negotiate in that way, it has proven to be absolutely a turning point for us, and it would make a big difference moving forward. So if we could have clarification on that, I'd appreciate it.
So cash deal, what it is, because you're defining it, Leslie, is because all the cash is received at closing.
Well, not just that. It does not require bank approval. The loan is already the loan. The funding's already been approved.
Through and you're calling the approval the award document.
Yes.
Okay.
If I may.
Yeah, please.
Probably related to what Celesta's comments were, while you have the loan approval, like many individual buyers, that's, you know, I've been approved for the loan, you still have to go through the closing process, even with the bank. And the time up front, the naming, as Leslie so eloquent, I mean, you know, clearly pointed out, it seems like a scary a barrier or undesirable barrier to me as a seller, because Celissa is making the offer, is right there. She's saying she can do it in 30 days. And just a little bit maybe in a defensive, or having learned, to be honest with you, posture. As Leslie said, many of the folk find out down the line that even though Beverly gave you a contract and said she would close in 30 days, stuff develops and that closing doesn't happen, either in 30 days or sometimes not at all. I hope that, you know, in the process, you're saying, hey, if that doesn't work out, you know, we're over here, check. But I
Yes,
would just use as, I've been so completely reminded as I've watched a friend of mine try to buy property in this climate. And she first put down and totally naively, just relying completely on a real estate agent, put a contract on a condo on Route 7 in Falls Church area. And as they moved toward closing, it turned out that and we've had this problem, I think, Leslie, that there was some stuff on the title documents that the person who was selling the document wasn't the person whose name was on the deed.
Yeah.
Okay. And so these things happen, and they, whether it's that or it turns out something else, stuff comes up, as we all know, even around this table, toward closing, that creates a problem that if you'd have just said, okay, we'll skip all of these other requirements, wouldn't have been exposed. And there you would be, having to buy the property. Bad enough in itself, especially for your equity money, but federal, requirements won't let us, take those kind of no inspection and whatever risk in most circumstances with federal money. My friend, unfortunately, ended up having to fight almost in court to get her deposit back from that deal, and then turned around, put a contract on the property on Columbia Pike. And because the market is hot, David, the properties were selling and so forth and so on. But one little hint from me, she would be asking, there was one unit being sold by court order, not because the guy was being forced by financial reasons, but just because the condo just wanted him out. He was obnoxious, but whatever person. But anyway, and the trustee of the court was selling the property for like $200,000. But the market, as the different condo owners were flocking to sell, were 225, 220, and what have you. And when one came up that she really, really liked, based on her needs for a mom, her real estate agent told her, when a friend of hers said, well, I really wanted to get in this building. She had a friend, 2 friends in the building. So we offered overpriced. And her real estate agent said, yeah, I think you should offer 230, even though they asked for 225. Let me remind you, as a real estate agent, how much money I get paid depends on how much the property sells for. Just saying. Anyway, when it turned out, with the inspections and various things that went on with that property, it ended up, last I knew, down to a $210,000 price based on checks and whatever. So, and the settlement had last I knew, been changed 3 different times. And so those pressures are there, but I think as often, if not more often than not, the requirements, quote unquote, that the federal money put in there, as I said, at least half the time, if not more, prove to be safeguards that are in the end better for the nonprofits. I have been an advocate for doing this as quickly as possible to give the nonprofits as much advantage as possible. And when and we'll talk about that in a minute, when we get, the game going, when you get a contract, I'm about how, the race, how quick can we get it to the LUC? I'll play the ugly role on this end, even though I'm being beat up on your end, and we'll get it done as quick as we can, even before 45 days, if we get our ducks in order. But
We
there
got
are
one
some
done in
things.
30 days. Yeah.
Beg
Yeah,
your
we
pardon.
just can't
Yeah,
promise.
even sometimes I agree with you, whether it's the convention of the LUC or how many days notice we got to give to the finance or whatever. But these days of rising prices create opportunities for sellers, but they can create risky conditions that can boomerang back, as we know from 2008, against the buyers. So, but I do think that we need to hear all of the feedback, and we need to constantly be working on improving our underwriting process to, eliminate stuff that we really don't need to, be dealing with. So
that's very true. And to Dr. Solis's point, I think that, we're all an advocate of the advantage for the nonprofits as much as possible to secure these units. I don't know that there's any legal reason why you can't call it a cash deal. And Casey, not to put you on the spot, but if we do investigate that there's some kind of legal term of, or is it just a term of art in terms of like, this just means you have an approval. An approval is an expansive definition. It can mean the approval of, you have a letter that's saying that you've been approved to utilize these funds. Is that suffice for, so I mean, I don't see any legal reason why you can't call it a cash deal unless there's something on the real estate side that would counter that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that question right now.
Yeah. So let's address it, you know, so we can make an official stance on that. But right now, I don't see that as an issue.
You know, I think this is David. I know that there have been several times where we have had sellers ask us for our grant letter, our award letter.
Right.
We actually have that commitment. But I think it's also a real misunderstanding on the part of the sellers, you know, when they're weighing between going with a, you know, private buyer who's getting bank financing versus us. Because a bank underwriting is about the capacity of that buyer to purchase that unit. When we're getting the funding, the CDBG in home money, it's really not about our capacity. It's not about Good Shepherd Housing having that ability to purchase it, because that you've already determined that we have the capacity to take it on and to do that purchase. Because all it's about is actually having the capacity to close on that transaction. It's a different kind of commitment. And the bank underwriting is, as we all know who purchased homes, it's arduous. I mean, it's grueling to get through a bank underwriting as a private buyer. So I just think it's a different kind of underwriting and a different focus. And we actually bring probably a better deal all around because our capacity is not in question yet. We've already gotten the commitment.
Sure. Okay. Good points. Excellent. Any more discussion on that? Any more questions? And we'll issue a clarification on that. Does that answer your question in the chat, Dr. Salissa?
Not yet, but I'm sure when you communicate in terms of once you have an opportunity to take a look at it, we'll have it in the Q&A system. But I absolutely think just in terms of adding value to what David is saying as well, it certainly does give the nonprofits the capacity to negotiate competitively. Those dollars are there, but it does in fact imply that there's no, you know, financing contingency, but as David has said, there really isn't. So it's all in terms of framing, and the key is that we're clear in terms of if we can continue or go back to that mode of negotiating, because it makes a significant difference.
Okay. Okay. All right, so Jenny's going to cover the rehabilitation policy and then, excuse me, the rehabilitation standards, and then the reserve policy. We currently have a reserve policy in place, and that's, you know, the 25% over $200 of monthly income that you have, you know, to be put away for reserves. We are revising that policy to be more detailed in terms of what the expectation is going forward of all your units going forward, of what we'd like those reserve accounts to look like in terms of balances in comparison to your current holdings, your FCRHA holdings. Yes, Beverly. Yeah.
Now, are you coming back to me that I'm supposed to do something?
You're on, like, right now. Yep. And I'm going to speed this along. Yeah, you guys are coming up. Oh, you need to check out for a bit?
No, I don't. I just wanted to know if I would. Okay, I'll address what I want to say in after you.
Okay, so for the next 20-25 minutes or so, Jenny, and it's going to be the Jenny and Beverly show. So Jenny, if you want to, you know, we've talked about this, I'm just gonna, these are the larger areas in terms of the underwriting and closing. Beverly, you're on first in terms of underwriting. Are you ready? So I'm just gonna let you go into your piece
Oh,
here.
okay. I thought you were gonna cut to Jenny.
I can
Okay.
cut to Jenny.
It-
I
it
can
didn't
cut to
matter.
Jenny. Okay.
It's that to Jenny. Jenny,
Okay.
do you want to go forward first?
Yeah, let's
Well,
do
I
Jenny
think the only
first.
thing I was going to talk about real quick was the rehab standards, and that was in the previous slides. But I mean, it didn't have any more material. But
Hold on, Jenny.
basically,
Yeah,
the
I'm
rehab
getting-
standards is the same from the last RFP. It's the same document. And basically, it's a summarizing document of all the standards, the state, local, and federal requirements that would apply to your project if it is rehab, and the projects that have CDBG and home funding. So if you take a look at it, you'll see the federal relocation, disaster mitigation, and property standard requirements that is required for CDBG and home assisted properties. So if you haven't looked at it, you should, because it's required to comply with it when you are fulfilling your project goals. And then I think next is Beverly for the underwriting.
I just have your checklist up here, Beverly, if you just
Okay.
want to pick out key points.
Yeah.
Okay,
And let's
you.
run through. I want to do an overview, then I want to try to either as I go or after the fact, point up the places where maybe in recent past year or two or whatever, where we can have hiccups and, talk together, brainstorm together, whatever, or just remind
Yeah.
you, to be conscious of those areas. Okay. And agreed again, we are like a cash office. The issue issue is not getting approved for the loan like a private person. The issue is satisfying and you already have those contingencies, your lead base, your home inspection, and those things. And that's what they are asking private buyers to waive in order to quickly get, to closing. Okay, basically the better that and in fact, it's even better, particularly for relocation purposes, to give us heads up that you are seriously approaching putting a contract down on a property with that address. And if you, even before but it's coming, you have that executed contract, if you would send that to Laura so that it can already be lined up, and it may be 95%. This is going to be what, Pathways is going to be looking at this property at 123 Broad Street or whatever. So Jenny, you take this one or whatever. And at the same time, you can notify Carol Earhart, okay, to get started on that review for purposes of uniform relocation. Okay, because it rarely comes up, but when it comes up, that if you got a property that somebody's living in, my mother's property, and I happen to be living in the basement or whatever, if you don't raise that question at the beginning, before you sign that contract, to know that I'm present in that house, even if they, she said, oh, that's just my daughter or whatever, you want to make sure that that's not going to cause any kind of hiccup, because technically I got to get that URA notice, if I'm living there. And, just checking with Carol, who's the expert, the guru, to tell you what has to happen relative to Beverly if she's in that spot. So you know how to do that, and you can get that done as a part of your contract ratification. And we're not discovering it. I have had, not recent years, but I certainly have had a situation where we literally were on the eve of closing, and it turned out that there was somebody in the property, and the nonprofit got mad at me because I told them that we got to go through this URA process, kind of thinking somehow that I was just, meanly imposing this or whatever, which certainly would impact closing. But many times people innocently don't mention that I let my nephew stay, in that basement, or, I have a friend, but she's agreed that she'll be moving because she knows I'm retiring. You got to have the objective, requirements met. And you want to make sure that people are telling you that, even though a piece of paper is there and I'm signing it at the time of the contract, because I'm focused on getting the money, because I'm getting ready to retire, or I'm moving to Hawaii or whatever. Many times people don't read the things they're signing. And so we want to, focus on that. I'm encouraging you to focus on that at the time, and even right before you sign that contract, to know if there's somebody in there or not. And if there's somebody in there and you want the property, and then, contact Carol to say, okay, how can we do this? Or, is it possible to do this? What has to happen? Because while they're still there, those tenants, the best time to get in touch with them, to get them to provide the information needed. And once I've moved out and moved to Maryland or California, wherever, it's kind of hard, to track me down, and for folks to get in touch with me, to have me to confirm that it was a totally voluntary move. And so that would be one of the things I would lift up. So as soon, and I encourage you, obviously, when you get that executed contract, you want to get that to Laurel so it can be signed, because it's the time that we receive that executed contract that the days start. But if you know that on Friday you're likely to sign a contract for that property, and you get the information over to Laura, who can then assign it, there may be some things, to start the time, not officially, but to get things done, before the official clock starts. So I don't, if Laura wants to jump in there or whatever, certainly we don't want to waste staff time or whatever. But when you reasonably well know you're going there, it's to your advantage and our advantage, to get that activity going as soon as possible. And you're working on the things that you have to do. You have to, of course, you want confirmation, and you got your letter of the award. Now, you have to send, and I have to commend Dr. Salissa, is very good at that, and others, sometimes, most of the time, but sometimes we can be inconsistent with, and it can be closer to the LUC date that we're sending out these emails to say, hey, Supervisor Moses, I'm about to buy this property in your and this is what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. And even including, whether by copy or direct, in the address, the commissioner, RHA commissioner who's over that, that gets it an email in hand, in pocket, in the files, that we don't, at the last minute, trying to get an LUC together, have to go looking for. And we can follow up on that sooner rather than later, because there have been times that even small stuff like that can slow up or threaten slowing up, the LUC approval process, because that must be on file and we have to follow up even after you send the email. So I want to encourage you, as it is listed here, to try to make that a priority thing. The environmental abstract, sending that to Tony Essie. Most of you, I know, as far as I know anyway, that I've worked with, Homestretch is the only one there that I haven't done anything with of late. And so again, Tony Essie, and I'm sure that Kende is giving you that contact information, and Pathway and Good Shepherd know that. Getting the appraisal request, at this point we are working on, and we'll be updating the appraisal approved or whatever appraisers to be used, and how we will do that, particularly trying to weave in, but not just, but particularly trying to weave in diversity of those economic opportunities, into the selection. Right now, we have one that we've been using for several years, and we want to shift that up, actually, to our credit, pat ourselves on the back. We thought of that before there was a one Fairfax. We began working on that. And in fact, if you know of women or minority appraisers in this area, feel free to shoot me an email with that contact information, that we can consider, putting them on as we work on trying to figure out how to do that. So of course, Northern Virginia is very good about, turning their appraisals around very quickly. And so that's a great thing that it may prove challenging to compete with while we're, considering other appraisals, but that's the advantage of having, the sole market. You get familiar with stuff in ways that other new appraisers may have to, spend some time getting a learning curve around. And obviously, the sooner you get me those things, see, once you send in that abstract, it's on our internal staff to get us the environmental clearance. And that can be worked with even if it doesn't come in exactly in time for the LUC meeting. And depending on the condition and the location and all of that stuff that I really don't know anything about, it's how quickly they can get that environmental review completed. But the home inspection, the radon, the lead baits, all of that you all have regular folk that you're working with. They know your rhythm, and get it back to you as soon as possible. Please, please, please don't wait to compile all of them to send me one email with all of them there. If you got the lead base today, send that today. If you're going to get the radon tomorrow, send it tomorrow. Don't hold the lead base, okay, until you get the radon and the home inspection. Now, there does come a point, I don't necessarily look at them right when you send them, but having them in pocket when I turn to pull all that together and it's all there, okay, helps us get your, LUC stuff, together more efficiently and more quickly. And because it's a lot of time consuming detail-based work that we each do in the at the same time that we're doing a whole lot of other things that oftentimes have, a lot of deadlines, like working on the annual report to HUD, on, the annual plan or whatever. But meanwhile, Good Shepherd's trying to go to closing, on this property. And so all of that, I have to work it into what I have to do in a timeline. I'm relying on you when I can turn in the right way to get it to Laura and those who have to review it before I go forward. I want to turn to the file and it's all there. But then if I got to turn to the file and say, okay, Lauren or Leslie, where's the home inspection? Where's the this and that and the other? That just slows it down, yeah, so I advise, and again, she has it there, but as indicated at the very, very top, we want to work on and have that voluntary arm's length offer and all of that signed off stuff sooner rather than later. And when it's discovered after the fact, which has happened several times, not a massive amount of time, that there's somebody there. We've seen it on bigger projects, multi-family housing constructions and things like that, where the relocation staff under Carol Earhart has to chase down former tenants, and it can be a problem. So we want to get them while they're still there, hopefully, before they move, so because if they don't, you all know, but I'll remind you, I can say, yeah, so listen, great, I'll be moving out of your townhouse anyway. And yeah, I understand you're going to sell it. No problem. You're not forcing me. Okay. But if I don't put that on the sign, do you know that 2 years from now, I could come and say, well, I didn't know I could get benefits. I discovered that somewhere and claimed that you told me I had to move. And if you don't have documentation of that, somebody, and Fairfax is saying, it's not going to be us, but somebody's going to have to pay damages to that former tenant. And all kinds of other financial requirements, or we have to pay HUD back the federal money. So that's something, it's a little thing. It doesn't become an issue until it becomes an issue. And we don't want to get caught in that. Okay, the updated financials, when you get that audit annually, boom, send that so that it's in your file with grants management, no matter when your next acquisition. And if your next acquisition is not into, or your portfolio not until December, that's fine, as long as it's within 6 months. Get in the habit, I think, July 1 and January 1 of just sending updated financials. Obviously, there's the audit, that's official, but then when you have the 6 months later, those are unaudited financials. You just, put them on file so we have them. So I don't have to come back and your staff doesn't have to do the laborious task of putting together that detail. And most of you, if not all of you, you're already putting together some kind of reports that really extractions can be pulled from to just create the portfolio sheet. We have tried to create and maintain a running portfolio sheet so that when it's time to update, all you got to do is pull up what you last sent to us and add the other properties to it and keep it moving. So you don't have to recreate a document every time. You know, the different financials, last
So
base.
Beverly, that comes to you?
No, well, you can send it to anybody, really. Send it to Malia, whatever, what you
Okay.
want, unless if it's tied to a deal we're doing right now, certainly you want to do that. But
Yes.
if you just got your audit, you don't have any deals on the table, send
Right.
it anyway.
Okay.
You can send it to Malia and she will put it in the file, because you all have one file. If Kahinde's closing on your next acquisition, she's going into the same file that I will use 2 months from now to close on the other acquisition. So having those corporate documents right there available, your portfolio, all of that right there available for no matter who is doing your underwriting for that particular property, and the consistency of the format and the data that is presented there is huge, because oftentimes we're leaning for standard language kinds of things and carryover things. I mean, if she's calculated the rate on the overall portfolio, then I don't have to recalculate. I can use what she had in her last. And so, you know, we have to do this very efficiently, because again, it's in the context of the larger body of work that we're doing, which is the same on your side, of course, but I'm just trying to be transparent with you so that you understand, you know, where we're coming from with that and the need to try to make all of this as routine as possible, even though it's not routine, you know. You know, your project, you know, the project description seems to be the last document, and often I have to come back and ask for the document, and I'm not quite sure why. I think it may be because of the pro forma that is embedded in that project description. But there's so much in addition to that pro forma. I'm looking at, you know, the number of bedroom. Well, yeah, I can get that off the appraisal, but what is your planned use? This is for homeless. This is for people with disabilities. This is for single family, whatever. This is for just low income, whatever. So that description of what you're planning to use the property for and some of those other narrative things are important for me, as well as that pro forma. Okay, we're expecting to spend $315,000 for it. We're going to put in 5,000, 3,000, 7,000, whatever, and the seller's going to kick back 3,000. Okay, and so that part is there. The rest is going to be FCRHA money, and these are expenses. You know, your routine, reasonable, based on whatever you worked with your selling agent of, you know, what the closing costs are. This is the projected taxes. You know, be able to give me some kind of notion, us, when I say me, I mean any one of us, you know, how you calculated those taxes. Bear in mind that once I do that memo, we do, when I say I mean any of us, we walk into that LUC meeting as if we are personally asking for this money for our personal use. And so they go down the line and say, well, where they're going to do it, how they're going to pay for it, whatever. So many times when we come back with those kinds of questions, I do it preemptively, because I want to go in there, be able to ask whatever they're going to answer, whatever they're going to ask based on what I know how folk move and which one is going to ask about this and which one. So I don't want to have to come back to you and have it contingent approval on this or that. I want to get it done now, be able to answer whatever, you know, Teresa or Ryan or Tom or whoever's going to ask based on what they've asked the last 4 times, and get that information. So as you're putting those pro formas together, please be intentional about, you know, why you're using that number or whatever. That's not a bad idea, quite honestly, to just put in parentheses or in a note or something was like, you know, based on experience or whatever. And those risk assessment and management plan things, sometimes for that questioning thing, and depending on the, you know, the particulars of the unit that you are dealing with and the population you're serving, you know, the risk. One of the reasons they're there for us as underwriting staff, because those are the kinds of things that members who are all the senior staff of the agency, members of the LUC will focus on. Yeah, but if this is a population who doesn't have, but $50 a month, then how is this? Or if how are they going to get this leased up? And it's good to be transparent about, okay, we're relying on CSP and blah, 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 and this is the process and this is how we project. That has helped as we focus on those things more and more and made them transparent. It helps us in the underwriting process to not only be able to explain it, but to educate the LUC about how all this works together. So if you're getting a property that you're going to do a little renovating to, and then you're going to house 6 adults with special needs or whatever, you're not going to have all of those folks in there tomorrow. Okay, and so explaining that and the delay that might take for getting them qualified, and otherwise we got folks on the waiting list, therefore we can get these single family condos together, or we're having problems locating people, but the demand is there and we're waiting for referral, whatever. So those narratives, believe it or not, especially when they're not just routinely copied and carried forward, they are helpful, both for the memo, but particularly for when we're facing LUC questions and so forth. The settlement agents, I have not found I have found that all of them very quickly, catch up to, the process of making sure they have wire instructions in hand, because as soon as we walk out of that LUC and they say, boom, you can have this, we approve that. We must move quickly. That's one of the tight things right there. We must give, based on county policy and so forth, so many business days to them, 10 business days or something now, to get that wire in place. So that means I want to be in that LUC at least 2, if not 2.5 weeks before closing. That's a lot. That's hard. More on you than me. And so the sooner you can start gathering your information and data dumping it on our side, the specific property information at the time of underwriting goes to whoever that underwriting staff is. The off transaction updates of your financials, send it to Malia. Malia knows everything and she can do everything. That's the way it feels anyway. We would be a mess worse than we are if it wasn't for Malia. And so we can get that going and have everything in place. Then after that, as you well know, we have to interact not with the LUC again, but now with the county attorney, okay, who's putting together the documents and approving, the settlement letter, all of which we draft on our end, and they put the final touches and make sure all of the legal I's and T's and what have you are in place, and get that to the settlement agent. And sometimes, as you know, we're sliding in the door by the hair of our chinny chin chin to get there. So anyway, that's my spiel. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, I'm happy. I'm done.
Thank you, Beverly. Okay, and again, here is your contacts. You guys can utilize this, print this out, utilize this as all of your contact information. Again, emails are best during this time. All of the appraisal information, relocation, environmental, and Section 3. And of course, remember to do your supervisor and RHA commissioner email notices. Remember the loan terms. We've been doing this for a few years now, but it's always good to remind you that the loan terms, that significant change that we changed to 2% annual accrued simple interest on the property after the 30 years. Any questions on the loan terms? Chris, this is new to you, probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then Jenny, if you want to cover monitoring, and if you could do so in 5 minutes.
Of course.
Thank you.
Well, more than enough time. As a reminder, the units that are assisted with our funds must have an affordability period of 30 years that kickstarts once the unit is occupied by a beneficiary. For our monitoring, there's 2 types of monitoring that we do. We have that annual desk audit where we get those spreadsheets from you all for each unit and get tenant information, tenant and income information. And that kick off every summer when HUD publishes the new limits that we insert into those templates that we ask you to fill out. And then the second type of monitoring is the on-site file review monitoring that is kind of staggered, could occur to your nonprofit every 1 to 3 years. And that type of monitoring is where we go into your files, we take a selection of your files, and we do a deeper dive into the certain aspects of it, such as the way the annual income, household income is being calculated, whether property inspections are being conducted, and just follow-ups and how those are being completed. On-site monitoring, as you can see listed there, the annual desk audit is basically more of a high-level information gathering that we're required to do. And just so you know, if we do find that units are surpassing limits, we won't penalize these units or ask you to have them leave the units. Unless they are over income, we might ask you guys to adjust the rent being charged. But what we would do is just make a note that this unit is not in compliance, but at the next available opportunity, when the unit opened up, we make sure that the new units have incomes that are within the income limits that is agreed to by your contract with us. Next slide. And so for each LU, and basically post-acquisition, I guess it was a little backwards. The monitoring is the long term, but post-acquisition, we do ask you to submit that beneficiary data, and that kicks off that 30 years affordability period. When we're able to get that occupancy information, we put it into our HUD IDIS system, and we can close the activity. That's why it's important to get that to us really quickly, because you want us to kick off your affordability period as soon as possible. Let me know if anyone has any questions about the monitoring. All right, thanks.
And of course,
Thank you, Jenny.
it's Malia who follows you up and chases you down about the data for those acquisitions. So.
Yes, Malia would be the person that you send those beneficiary data to.
Okay, any questions overall that you guys have? Any final thoughts that you'd like us to take? Any parting shots?
Nothing for me.
Okay, good. Good. Okay, so we'll work on our Q&As, our follow-up questions from our end, and issue that out shortly in an addendum. So look for that on the website. Okay, and I'm going to give you back 4 minutes of your life. So thank you so much for coming, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.